They were almost copy and pasted. It was almost like every announcement from the conferences was pretty much the same, thanking the president for leadership, and then saying now it's time to get to the I can't wait till we release the video version of that, and I'm going to be like, Dave, it's really exciting. Tim, right now.
I'm sorry.
Back.
Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and 𝘕𝘬𝘲, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, a sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim 𝘕𝘬𝘲.
And I'm David 𝗙𝗲.
David, welcome home to me. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm glad you made it home. I was wondering how close you might have been to you may have been out of town by the time the scrap between, or near scrap, between Geno Auriemma and Dawn Staley happened in the semifinals of the NCAA Women's Final Four. So tell me about what happened. I'm curious. It was fun seeing some pictures of you.
Between Dawn and Geno, or
well,
my experience?
I do want to know how close you got to that, but also just I'm very excited. It was just so much fun to see you kind of play out your role as chair of the Naismith Awards and so you get to present some of the hardware and everything. So yeah, give me a sense of how things went down and what went on, the highlights.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Call it whatever you want, just don't call it work. But I started the week. I arrived in Phoenix last Tuesday, just in time to attend the unveiling of a gym renovation that we did at a YMCA in the greater Phoenix area. That's one of the things that 𝘕𝘁𝘴𝘵, the president of the Atlanta Tip-Off Club, former guest on the show, created as a legacy project 6 years ago. So every Final Four city, we partner with a YMCA where Dr. Naismith invented the game of basketball, and we refurbish a gym and we unveil it during Final Four weekend. And so we did that in Phoenix. It was really nice. We did it in Indianapolis. And we actually connected with some people at the Y who want to become more involved with the project going forward. So it was, from that respect, it was great. And it's really fun to see these little kids. But at the men's tournament in particular, we get past winners there to see Greg Oden and Marcus Camby and TJ Ford playing with these little kids. But this year we had a couple of our finalists who were there as well. We had Ruben Chignello from Florida, 𝘕𝘬𝘲𝘀𝗲 Badunga from Kansas. We had AJ DeBonsis from BYU and Darius Acuff Jr. from Arkansas. They all came to the clinic as well and participated with the little kids. So that was a lot of fun to see. Friday night, we have our dinner. We have our welcome dinner. We're sponsors and past winners are there. Those guys I just mentioned were there. Coach Calipari was there. Coach Bobby Cremins was there. A lot of fun. And I got back to the hotel and going through the hotel bar right with about 5 minutes left and maybe 7 minutes left in the women's game. So I stopped and watched that. So I got to see it on TV. I will say this, the entire UConn team came to our women's awards, so that's sort of become a tradition. If a team's in a Final Four and they have a finalist for player, defensive player, coach of the year, they come. Last year it was UCLA, year before that it was Iowa and South Carolina, and this year it was UConn. And Geno couldn't have been more gracious, couldn't have been more cordial there. But I will say this about Coach Staley, the way she handled herself, with the exception of the line, I'm going to beat Geno's ass, which you and I talked about a little bit, right? You can take the girl out of North Philly, but you can't take North Philly out of the girl. She handled the entire weekend, I think, as well as she possibly could have. And even into today where she said, let's turn the page on this. I have enormous respect for Geno. Put her in a very difficult position, right, as she's preparing her team for Sunday.
Yeah, well, Dawn Staley is not looking to get the Philly out of her. It's part of her. I think she wears it proudly. She's a fighter. Yeah. She's a leader. I mean, the level of leadership, and just while we're talking about the women's side, among the four coaches playing, I think you can say it for the men's side too, is quite outstanding. I think Geno had a really bad moment. I think I think he blew this one big time. I think he knows it. I don't think his apology was particularly full-throated enough. But it was an apology. It wasn't a horrible one. But what I'll say about this, I don't think I've ever had more people write to me about, the women's Final Four or the women's tournament for that matter than this year. And this is including the Caitlin Clark lighting it up years. People knew what happened with the coach from South Carolina, what happened. And so I found that fascinating. You have Geno Auriemma, among the most, if not the most decorated, successful coach in women's college basketball history.
Certainly is from a number of national titles and Naismith Award.
And he was getting beaten. They were clearly the favorite. They were undefeated. Who knows how much Dawn Staley gets under his skin normally. She's a tough competitor. She does not take shit from anybody. And it was a bad moment. It drew a lot of eyes. I have not seen the viewership numbers on the game. I looked not long before we came on, and I still hadn't seen them released, even from the semifinal games. I'm curious as to see. I know that heading into it, they were averaging about 930,000 per game, which is not as high as the last couple years, but still higher than the historical average. So I don't think that's bad, but I'm curious if any of that led to anything. I do want to say this about a couple things. One is the broadcast level that ESPN is now putting forth for the women's tournament, I think, just continues to get better. Their studio show was exceptional, knowledgeable women calling the shots there. Christine Williamson, Andrea Carter, and 𝘎𝘰𝘭𝘧, I believe. But they were fantastic. And then you have Holly Rowe on the sideline getting every interview and knowing the game inside and out. And more importantly than that, I think, and it's not their job to love the game, but with the women's game, I think it's a little more important to do that. And she does that, and she honors it, and she knows everything there is to ask about any player. And I think that's pretty cool. And I also want to say that I mentioned the coaches, the four coaches, Vic Schaefer, Dawn Staley, Geno, and 𝘎𝘭𝘧 from UCLA. I think last year's Coach of the Year winner.
All four of them have won the Naismith Coach of the Year award. At one point or another, Dawn Staley won 3 in a row a couple of years ago. Geno's won, I think, 8 or 9.
It is no surprise that 𝘎𝘭𝘧 was a mentee of John Wooden.
Mm-hmm.
Because she is a freaking quote machine like nobody I've ever seen. Literally everything out of her mouth. And it never sounds forced. I mean, you can sometimes the people that are always like dropping quotes, she drops them to such effect. And what a deserving champion. What a deserving champion coach. And that team playing for each other was great. Now, we say all that because, yes, we get kind of caught up in the fandom of all of this. But what I think this can mean heading into the WNBA draft, what it means for the future of the college game, to see that, and the quality of the play just continuing to get better. All four of the teams that were in the Final Four obviously are dominant teams that have the potential to win a national championship, I think, anytime the season starts. But for the foreseeable future, but it's hard to have dynasties in college sports. But
yeah, I mean, when you look at the players who were in the Final Four, and I'm sure I'm going to leave some out, but, 𝘎𝘭𝘧 Fudd, Lauren Betts, Gabriella Jaquez, Madison Booker. These are all probable top 10 picks in the upcoming WNBA draft. One of the facts that I found particularly fascinating is every point scored in that game by UCLA was scored by a senior. Every single point. And two other things I want to say about Dawn Staley that I really admire and respect about her. Number one, if she's doing a press conference, she will give more time to local media than she will to national media because they know her team better and their questions tend to be more thoughtful and insightful. And the other thing I would say is she was asked by the NCAA to stop signing autographs pre-post and during halftime of games and said, no, these are people who are helping grow our sport. I think that's just unbelievable.
Yeah. She's big on that. She's big on that. Very cool.
Yeah. So
should we give equal time to the men's side? Maybe. I don't know.
Well, just one more thing I want to say. Lauren Betts' journey has just been fascinating to hear about. Here is a woman who suffered from serious depression, sought help, came through on the other side, and is willing to talk about. So take away everything that she does on the court, and which is most outstanding player in the tournament. She was last year's Defensive Player of the Year. She was a finalist for Player of the Year. But her courage and bravery to talk about her journey to mental health is just, I think it's going to help countless people.
Yeah.
And she's not a bad dancer either with her teammates. No. If you saw some of those TikTok dances, they have fun.
Yeah, and it was interesting that, Holly Rowe asked her during the post-game about her mental health challenges and what she did, and she took it on, because it could have been a no, I don't want to talk about that now, I'm celebrating it. But she recognizes the platform that she may have. She sees what I think, has decided what she wants her legacy to be, what she wants to be as a person as well as an athlete. And I think that was an opportunity for her, and it was an amazing moment.
Yeah, no, I think, as I said earlier, I think she has helped countless young women and young men, right? Because it's not just young women who are watching her and her teammates. But congratulations to UCLA. But you asked the question, should we give equal time to the men? I think the answer is no, but we need to talk about them.
Well, I hated the fact that I had to stay up so late to watch One Shining Moment, which, again, as you recall from last year, it's not exactly my favorite bit, but I felt obligated to stay up, and it seemed like they were slow in getting that ready, because the game already started ridiculously late as far as I'm concerned, 8:50 or so on a work night. But listen, two teams, a Michigan team wins it. It was probably their worst game offensively, but they managed to, as they did throughout the tournament, shut down the other team, and did it largely with transfer portal players. These coaches seem to be able to pull these in this day and age, pull people together. Calipari was doing it early on, right, because he was taking one and done players, and now it's managing people that are transferring in from other programs and building a winning culture. And you would look at that Michigan team, or that Connecticut team for that matter, and go like, these guys look like they've been playing for 10 years together.
Yeah, that kid Mara, I mean, wow, the big Spaniard, unbelievable.
I was early on in the game when he was going to the left hook a lot, and he finally started dropping. But I was like, I kept thinking of Bill Walton, Tim, and going like, throw it down, big man. I was like, I wanted to see the dunk just off the move.
His name was brought up many times over the weekend.
Yeah, I'll bet.
A lot of people, but I like the kid, and 𝘎𝘁𝘐𝘲 playing hurt. He was one of our finalists as well. They just seemed to be a little bit better than UConn the whole night. Right, UConn was constantly sort of chasing him a little bit.
Just enough, and if the game was going to be dictated one way or the other, whether that was an offensive or defensive-based one, it was going to be Michigan doing the dictating, and so that puts them in favor, I think, to win But, two really good teams, two obviously very good coaches. Again, don't have the numbers, but while we're on college, I did want to talk about the executive order that was written last week on college athletics, trying to dictate how many times you could transfer, all things that were in this executive order that we've talked about that could be good solutions, but that can't be done by executive order. But here's my take on this, and I haven't heard anyone else necessarily say it right like this, because for the most part, you're like, it's an executive order, it doesn't mean anything. They can't enforce it by this. It's up to the actual parties that are involved in doing so, and I agree that is the truth. But what it did do is, right after the signing, all of the usual suspects, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC, and then individual schools, and then the NCAA. The NCAA may not have put out a post, and then, of course, Nick Saban, excuse me. I did the same thing you did once. Nick Saban came out in support of this, but it's always with, thanks for the leadership, now let's get the SCORE Act passed. Because it does need to be a legislative thing, because there's no way any of this stuff would hold up in court because of the challenges from the player and the player advocacy groups. Not one thought in that executive order about the players, and as we covered on this show, there was no coverage other than a past agent or something that represented the player side when the roundtable took place at the White House. So this is definitely something to benefit the old powers that be in college sports. And I'm not against them necessarily, but the SCORE Act is what they really want to codify all of this. And it may be good law, I don't know, but it's going to have a hard time getting through because there's so much opposition. So none of this may take place. I just think it seemed awfully convenient that everyone came out, and of course they had to thank President Trump for the leadership. They couldn't just say, hey, this is a good start. So we know it's like these things are all feel like they're just deals cut. I'm going to do this, but when you write your support of it, you have to thank the guy. You have to thank me.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about that.
I'm not going to say a word.
You can say a word.
No, I agree with you. I think it's insane that they think that somehow this pronouncement, this proclamation, this executive order is going to fix all the problems. And it's just, and what it does in effect, and I appreciate the thought that went into it. But I think what it does is it diminishes the pressure on Congress, who are, to your point, are the ones who need to pass something to codify it. And now they can say, well, there's already an executive order. It gives them an excuse not to pick it up as a...
The one thing I'll say about it is if it wasn't that they were almost copy and pasted. It was almost like every announcement from the conferences was pretty much the same, thanking the president for leadership, and then saying now it's time to get to the... I can't wait till we release the video version of that, and I'm going to be like, Dave, it's really exciting. Tim right now.
I'm sorry.
Back to no. But they know that this needs to be, and they're leaning on them because they don't want to take it. And listen, getting everybody on the same system and the same program would probably help. Probably help.
Yes, there are so many. There's such a patchwork of laws and regulations and everything else, and it's just if it goes unaddressed, it's going to do serious damage to collegiate sports. It already has. Yeah. We talked before we came on the air. 𝘎𝘁𝗧𝗏, the women's coach at Tennessee, has exactly 0 players on her roster right now. 8 current players have applied to go into the portal. Now, I don't know if they have an issue playing for her or if they just felt they had a better opportunity somewhere else. It certainly doesn't bode well for that once storied program led by the legendary Pat Summitt. But to have all 8 current players on the roster go into the transfer. Now, some of them may come back, but that's just bad.
What do you want to take up before we take a break and welcome a guest in?
Couple things. So, number one, congratulations to my good friend Justin Zambuto and the rest of the folks at 160/90. They were sold for $500 million to Publicis. 160/90 is the consulting arm of Endeavor, the former IMG Consulting, where I spent many years of my career. But $500 million for a consulting practice. It looks like Publicis is serious after buying Bespoke Marketing last year. Mike Boykin and Greg Bush out of Charlotte, former GMR executives who went out and launched a very successful agency on their own. So,
yeah, I'm curious as to whether or not that would ultimately fold into that brand. Publicis has a division that is Publicis Sports. As well, because that's always one of the interesting things that happens under when these mergers and acquisitions and so forth take place is how they roll up. 160/90 I think has developed a pretty well established brand name in the space. Of course, it's certainly an interesting development. I did want to hit on, because we've talked about 𝗙cie and Polymarket quite a bit over the last few shows. We know that a lot of the states are going to be coming at these companies now to try to get them regulated more like the typical sports betting houses. And a federal appeals court just shot down New Jersey's banning of them because of not being regulated by the state. And that could send a signal. There's plenty of other cases out there. I think one in Nevada is going to be coming up, but it's going to make it tough to win these things with that precedent coming out of a federal appeals court. In New Jersey, which is where things really start. Yeah, it depends on the makeup of the court, but this is a New Jersey appeals court.
But you don't know which president.
Well, my point is a federal appeals court is going to have some degree of precedent setting for other federal courts.
Yes, there's no guarantee that other districts need to follow the ruling of this particular court, but it certainly doesn't bode well for states and other jurisdictions. But this administration has been very clear that they don't want states to regulate these prediction markets, and depending on who the judges are, and I will get political for a second because people close to the president are making a lot of money from these prediction markets.
Yeah. On both, in different ways from both of the different companies.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I think we all would have thought this would have been a natural one to make it up to the Supreme Court, and I think we will see. I think it's still possible, but we'll see what the next wave of the state ones going by. I mean, you had a guy in your former governor, Chris Christie, who is obviously on the, is a spokesperson and I think maybe a board member for the gaming organization that is very anti these, and obviously because of their support of the other side of that, but because they feel now they're at a disadvantage to the prediction markets based on the lack of state regulation. So he's been out strong, and you got to think he has connections, even if they were appointees of this administration on that appeals court in New Jersey. And so that's part of why this one surprised me.
Knowing him and liking him are two very different things. He was a polarizing figure here in the state for sure. What do you say? Take a break?
Let's do it. All right. We have a good guest coming up, and we'll be right back.
It's time for our guest.
The sporting world shifts its attention away from March Madness and onto Augusta, Georgia, where the 90th edition of the Masters will be played this weekend. And we're pleased to be joined by 𝘠𝘬𝘀𝗀, EVP of Sales at GSE Worldwide, one of the most prominent golf agencies in the sports business. In his role, 𝘠𝘬𝘀 oversees all sales functions at GSE, including the marketing of their high-profile golf roster. Prior to joining GSE over 7 years ago, 𝘠𝘬𝘀 built a strong reputation as a revenue operations leader across a variety of industries, cutting his teeth in cycling, first as a professional cyclist before turning his attention to the business development side of the sports world. So, 𝘠𝘬𝘀, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Tim, nice to be here.
It's Masters Week. It's a huge event on the sports calendar. So beyond the importance of Augusta as one of the top worldwide events, how important is this weekend in terms of doing business, in terms of capturing opportunities?
Sure. No, I mean, the first major of the year, it's a big one. I think the Players Championship has come a long ways in the last, 5 years or so, especially. But really, this is the big one. This is, thinking about our clients themselves. It's the event that they all want to play in, right? So that's really what everyone's thinking about. Being able to compete in the Masters, it for us on the business side, really, the clients we have, locked in competing at the end of, let's say, the previous season, right? We know that their sponsors, right, their partners, we know their schedule is going to take them to Augusta. And then you have a group that's fighting to get their way in. And now with amateurs being allowed to play, and there being different ways for those amateurs to compete, ultimately there's a huge business opportunity for us as we run up to the Masters. And really that's not decided till last weekend, right, on Sunday. And it's always an exciting time when the winner of that event maybe gets to play in their first Masters, right, or compete. So it's a huge opportunity for us. The event has changed and evolved over the years, just with Augusta National and the different hospitality housing programs that they've instituted. That's certainly kind of shifted the way that agencies like GSE, look at Augusta, look at the Masters, because they have definitely taken more control just in terms of access. But it's an amazing event, for the golf world, for the agencies, for the golfers, everyone that's involved.
Yeah, you spoke about last Sunday, and last Sunday one of your clients, J.J. Spaun, won the Valero Texas Open, following up on his U.S. Open title in 2025. It certainly makes him one of the favorites going into this week. But what's that like for you as an agency and for your clients to have those guys playing so well going into this weekend?
No, it's huge for JJ, who had an amazing 2025. I've been fortunate to work with him since starting at GSE, even actually right before, in terms of some corporate partnerships. Just, what he's gone through from a health perspective and what he's overcome is absolutely amazing. Last year was beyond all expectations, I think. And it isn't because JJ wasn't a fantastic player, but to do what he did in 1 year, and to kind of come, to to finish the season from where he started, right? World rankings, FedEx Cup, all those things. Coming into this season, I think there's a lot of expectations. So for JJ to kind of get going, right, get some momentum, be able to, really take that confidence that comes with that win the week before, even though he didn't have to win to be in the Masters, he was already there. But to have that confidence is fantastic for him. And he's one of the guys that I really like, being able to spend time with.
Yeah, his story is so great. We were excited when he won the U.S. Open last year, and it's funny because you just mentioned that those guys that maybe win a tournament right before and get in, and that would have been the case. But he's coasting right now because he won the U.S. Open last year.
Yeah,
that was fun.
But it's nice to have momentum, right?
Oh yeah,
you'd rather be playing like he is than somebody who didn't make the cut.
It's like thinking back to the players last year. Lost the Monday playoff, right? At the Players, had a couple of big swings in the playoffs, to go to his first tour championship, right? It was an amazing year. The U.S. Open was the absolute pinnacle, but amazing season.
And he sold a ton of those putters, didn't he?
I think that 𝘠𝘲 did very well. I will say that 𝘠𝘲 did very well.
Good. Well, let's move over to another golfer. Bryson DeChambeau is a GSE client, and he is certainly one of the most compelling athletes we have right now across any sport. Beyond what he has accomplished currently on the LIV Tour or in majors, he has built a pretty massive following as I guess you'd say an influencer, creator. How important is that, and how influential has Bryson DeChambeau become because of the way he has marketed himself? I imagine with a lot of help from you guys.
Yeah, I think that Bryson is kind of like the unicorn of unicorns, right? In a lot of different regards as it comes to golf, sports, content creation, all these terms, right, that maybe we weren't thinking about, a few years ago. I've been very fortunate to work with Bryson and his agent, 𝘠𝘲𝘀𝗲, since April of 2016. Before I was with GSE, when I was working on the brand side, doing consulting work, helping companies identify opportunities, had a company that wanted to get into golf. They were cybersecurity, AI, back before AI was as cool as it is now. And they're like, where do we want to go? And Bryson was the guy that the CMO really wanted to work with. And so to see where he's come, in real times in the last 10 years is pretty amazing. I think his press conference today, at the Masters spoke to a lot of the innovation that he is constantly thinking about. I think the transition from the PGA Tour to LIV was definitely one of the catalysts for diving deep into the YouTube space, having more time, right? Knowing he didn't have the pressure of trying to qualify for the majors because of his success in previous seasons. LIV Golf being a more global calendar of events. I can tell you that like the analytics around like his YouTube audience, the amount of fans and subscribers that he has outside of the United States is wild. Especially since it's still golf content, but it's Bryson being Bryson. I think that really speaks to how powerful that brand and that persona has become in the last couple of years.
So it's very authentic to him.
100%. Yeah.
So I've worked with golfers on behalf of clients that I've worked with. When I was at AT&T, we had endorsers. I've always wondered this, and I suppose I could have asked the question at the time, but how do golfers balance their duties to the sponsors and to the media with their need to prepare physically and mentally for any event, but obviously this week is particularly important?
Yeah, I think that's evolved over the last 4 or 5 years. LIV Golf was potentially a part of that evolution because it put the PGA Tour in a position where not only were we going to have major championships, we're also going to have signature events, right? Plus, we're going to have full field events. Because when I got started in golf, I was coming into this, from the brand side. So a good understanding of how companies could see value in sponsoring something or a person, right? Team, property, person, whatever it was. You start, I had to shift my mindset, when I was sitting on the same side of the table as the agents and the athletes versus the brand, right? In terms of thinking about what they, will and, maybe don't necessarily want to do, even though for a sponsor, you end up having to have those conversations. I think the key is really to get ahead of that and know your client, like know what they're really comfortable with, whether it's during a tournament week, whether it's between tournament weeks. A lot of that has to do with family, as these guys have gotten older in the last 5 to 8 years, we've started to see, more have gotten married, more have started to have kids. They want to be home between events. And so we have to be very thoughtful of that. And I think, again, it goes back to being very open, transparent, with our partners that, hey, this is the best time for this to happen, or maybe we can do this, during like on the Monday of a tournament week, because we know that they're going to be there. But it's just a constant dialogue, I think, more than anything. And you're never not going to be in a position where at times, having to go to a dinner on a Tuesday night isn't going to feel like, your practice got shortened. But each one of these, each one of our clients are individuals. And so really knowing them kind of gives you a sense of what you can ask, the types of companies that they could potentially work with. Social media layers into that as well, because for some people that is time consuming. It can be stressful. So just really understanding, I think, your client when we're on the agency side, and that's what we do. That's our business. We represent athletes and individuals. Knowing them will help navigate through, the hiccups that come with sponsorship and partnerships.
GSEs has some of the biggest names playing, including Bryson, of course, 𝘕𝗔 𝗲𝘓, Joaquin Niemann, Louis Oosthuizen, Abraham Ancer, as well as a lot of players on the PGA Tour. How would you characterize the difference between marketing a tour player versus a live golf player?
It was interesting. So before live golf really kind of kicked off, is June of 2022, I believe, is when we got started. We had a sense of what they wanted to do and the team format and, uniforms and all those things. We had 14 of our, best golf clients make the transition, make that choice, see the opportunity. So it was a big group for us as an agency. We didn't know exactly how it was going to play out. Sponsorship, marketing, the teams, all those things. I had to get heavily involved in what that world looked like and where they were starting from, because, in addition to, those 14 golf clients of ours, 4 of them were team captains. So now they are a part of these decisions being made, what their uniforms are going to look like. I mean, really who their sponsors were going to potentially be. I think that Liv thought that the equipment companies, that the large clothing companies that are really endemic to golf, I think they thought that there would be more adoption, there'd be more interest, there'd be more buy-in, right? And really what we saw in the first 3-6 months of Live Golf was basically every corporate partner, and for the most part, equipment partner, outside of maybe just supplying product, right? They kind of disappeared. And, by the end of 2022, there was a bit of a change in terms of executive leadership at Live and what they thought the structure was going to look like and who was going to be selling sponsorship. I mean, it shifted as they went into 2023. What you're seeing now is companies coming in to be partners of Live Golf at the league level, right? And being able to look at team engagement, interaction, sponsorship as a component, right, of that like larger global opportunity. And that makes a lot of sense to me, to package it that way. And you have a much, much different tour, now with Live Golf in 2026 than you had in 2022, 2023, right? And it's obviously much more global than like what the PGA Tour is doing. So, the teams themselves are really focused on the marketing opportunities around, if Sergio's team does a sponsorship or a partnership, every player on that team is going to wear that company's logo. It's not just going to be Sergio, even though maybe Sergio is who's most interesting. Same with Bryson, same with Louis, same with Joaquin. So really, you're not seeing the individual partnerships happen. It isn't to say that they couldn't do those things, but it comes back to, and you come from the brand side, like what value do you potentially see, and what's the investment you're willing to make, right? And does that investment line up with what, in the athlete's mind, they're willing to, engage and activate that partnership, look at the services involved, for what the company is willing to invest.
And while I'm sure it's baked into the sponsorship fee, the amount of exposure you get because different players wearing the logo, you don't have to wait for Sergio to be on screen and teeing off or putting or hitting his approach shot or whatever it happens to be.
I think that's certainly the value add, right, of it being a team, everyone playing at the same time. The concept around the shotgun start, was really about being able to see every player play, not just, the 4 or 6 hours whenever you happen to show up based off of what the tee sheet looked like. But the global component is a big one. It's Fox Sports now that's, broadcasting for Live Golf. You've got a lot of international events. I mean, that's really where they've been, is overseas up to this year. And so it's going to be a slightly different audience in terms of who's attending those events, and then also who's watching.
I'd like to shift gears for a moment, if you don't mind, and talk about collegiate golf, and specifically what kind of opportunities college golfers have for making NIL money. When you think about the amount of money that professionals golfers make in endorsement deals, it often dwarfs the endorsement money that other professional athletes make. But when you think about NIL, your mind tends to go to football and basketball. So what are your thoughts, and what are the possibilities for collegiate golfers in the NIL space?
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing commitment money, being paid to college golfers for the last couple of years. Going to like a high school kid that's going to commit, that's maybe still a junior, he's got 1 year left, right? But getting that commitment to this transfer portal, I think that's probably going to be the biggest difference. 100%. Schools are paying NIL money to get the best golfers to go compete. Are they going to be changing schools at the same rate, or any percentage of the same rate as, let's say, football and basketball? I don't see that. I just don't. I think that there's a couple of big differences. I think that golfers from a socioeconomic perspective, right, are maybe in a different place, right? So they're not necessarily looking at transferring schools as being a way to make more money. That could change 100%. I don't think that, the amount of money being paid could, negate someone wanting to make that choice, but I haven't seen that yet. Not like football and basketball. I think that it's a smaller group, right, that are really being recruited and paid scholarship money, which now is basically being called NIL money. Much, much different, much, much smaller in terms of a pool than football and basketball. And, with the way that the current, I should say, NCAA cap works for each school in terms of what they're spending, it's going to be smaller conferences, probably smaller schools that want to allocate any money towards golf, not football or basketball. And every school is going to be a little bit different. Is the University of Oregon still going to try and recruit the best kids they can? Are they going to have Nike deals? Are they going to have opportunities for equipment? Sure. But how much money is Oregon going to spend on golf versus football and basketball?
Well, as a Wake Forest grad, Omer, I'm hoping that we continue to support that sport, but at the same time, I wouldn't mind us being a little better at basketball again.
Well, I think that's the challenge is it's changed a lot every year.
Yeah.
And honestly, like the idea of it becoming, more political than it is, what happens to the NCAA?
Yeah.
I don't know. But we have, like, it's going back to your original question, like, the colleges that want to be invested in golf and want to recruit the best kids in the country are paying NIL money high school going into college, in college itself. So like it's already happening.
Golf has produced some of the biggest sports business storylines over the last few years, and of course a lot of that is the live and tour split and all the things that have happened since then. Give us your view of back to the professional side, but the professional landscape of golf. Are we in a good place? Are we in a challenging place?
My perspective of golf on the lead up to live golf, essentially launching and having accomplished what it did, it's changed golf a lot. Certainly from a financial perspective, right? And ultimately that goes back to the sponsors of golf as a sport, right? And we've seen an escalation in prize purses. Obviously Live Golf kind of set a precedent, right? When they started in terms of what the prize purses were. The PGA Tour, they shifted to the signature event structure. I was at the Players Championship a few weeks ago, or I guess probably a month or so ago now, and was in person, listened to the new CEO Brian Rolap's kind of State of the Union address about where they want to go. This competition committee, right, going to more signature events, essentially full field events, maybe becoming like a B, with signature events, 15 of those being like the A tour, the B tour being the non-signature events, and maybe some Corn Ferry Tour events, and then kind of going down from there. So I think that challenging it is. It's challenging because the cost of entry, for a company to get involved in golf has certainly changed. It's gone up because of all of the factors that have changed in golf as a whole over the last 2 or 3 years. So, costs a little bit more money to be a title sponsor, an official marketing partner, to work with a top 10 player in the world, because there's been those escalations.
Before we let you go, we have 2 questions that we ask every one of our guests. So the first one is,
where'd your career get started? Where'd you start it?
David sort of, spoiler alert, in his introduction.
He has to reveal more.
Correct, but tell us.
Sure. So I raced bicycles professionally from the early 2000s. My last year was 2009. I got hurt in a crash at the Tour of California, which was at the time the biggest race here in the US. It was rainy. We were racing down a mountain, big pile up, right? All those fun stuff. So career's over. I was racing for a team that was sponsored and owned by the 𝗙𝗲𝗃 company. So they make vacuums, right? The pet hair eraser, right? Like all those, like home care products.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. 𝗙𝗲𝗃 was a passionate cyclist and huge fan, and I'd raced for them since end of 2005. So it was a big family at that point, and so they gave me the opportunity to go into the management side. And there was a couple different things that were important. One was kind of the interaction, day-to-day management of all of the cyclists that we had under contract, the mechanics, massage therapists, all the folks, that were the staff of the team, the logistics of moving from point A to point B, going from race to race. But then also, how is 𝗙𝗲𝗃 going to see value in their sponsorship? So thinking about like activation, right? We saw a lot of value doing events, city by city, where we were going racing, doing activations at events like the Tour of California that were televised. But cycling was a relatively small sport just in terms of audience in the US. I mean, people watch the Tour de France historically, right? But it was smaller, much, much smaller in the US. And that was really how I got started. It was an opportunity I was really excited about. I liked the business side of it. I had been teammates with a lot of the guys that we had racing on the team. So it was easy to be their friend. It was a little more of a challenge to become their boss. And I was able to grow in that position, all the way up until really 2015. 𝗙𝗲𝗃 was kind of, leaving the sport. He'd been in it for, really since the late 90s, and was making some changes from a brand direction. I decided, I was going to go out on my own and figure out how to do this. Found a cybersecurity company that had a passionate CEO in terms of cycling. And they gave me the opportunity to build a women's professional team in Europe. We ran that team out of Barcelona and a men's team in the US. And then they also, let me start going and looking at other sports for them in terms of spending their sports budget. So we got into golf. We looked at opportunities in Formula One. It was really sales focused. So all of their sales leadership, their partners in other countries, creating events around the idea that the team that this company that was a sponsor of was going to be coming to town. People get excited about that event. Golf, was really eye-opening to me at that point because we had like 35 events a year, right, that we could go do that at. It was like, man, this is an absolute no-brainer, right? And it's like NFL cities without the NFL's price tag, especially when you work with the athletes, right? Because there is so much access that comes along with that. And then, fast forward 2019, GSC had just kind of undergone some ownership changes, and they asked me to come on board full time, sell all the golfers, not just the handful that I had sold already.
We have not had anything close to that story before.
No.
And there actually is a Mr. 𝗙𝗲𝘀𝗲, not just a brand name. There is a Mr. 𝗙𝗲𝘀𝗲.
Yeah.
All right.
He's the third. He was the third or fourth generation owner when I had the fortune to work for him. And
the last question, what one piece of advice would you have for someone looking to break into the sports industry, whether it's somebody transitioning from being an elite athlete or somebody right out of college, however you want to approach the answer?
Yeah. It's a tough question because everybody's coming from a different place, right? I think, and I have this conversation with all of our young folks at GSC because we do hire a lot of entry level. This is your first job out of college. You've got a sports degree of some sort, or maybe you were an athlete before, a business degree. And I think obviously being passionate about the industry that you're working in it allows you to put up with a lot, right, that comes along with like getting started in a career. What does that look like? I kind of avoided that by, being paid to pedal a bicycle, until 2009, right? But then even I had to figure out, well, what am I going to be happy doing? I loved the lifestyle that being a professional cyclist gave me. So going into that space on the management side just made all the sense in the world. But where was the guy going to go from there? Do I really want to be a director forever? Do I really want to be in charge of what I'm in charge of? Like, what other opportunities are there? So I think the biggest thing is you should always be thinking about exploring the world that you're working in. You should be, passionate, but at the same time, you have to put some time and effort into figuring out what you don't like to do, right? That's really, really important because it's easy to get stuck doing something, let's say because it pays well or you're passionate about the industry, but man, I'm just miserable because this is not where I wanted to be, even though I'm in this industry. So if you figure out what you really don't like to do, then it's going to give you the opportunity to really explore and dive into the things that you do enjoy doing. And maybe the last thing is don't be afraid to ask for help or ask questions. And what I mean by help is help getting to where you want to go. Like find people around you. Maybe that's not going to be everybody, but find people around you that you can have that conversation with. And, whether they have advice or they're just a sounding board, it's important to kind of be able to get that off your chest.
Great advice.
We thank you for that. Omer, wonderful spending time with you. And despite what Tim said, one final question.
All right.
Who's your master's pick?
Who's the master's pick? I'll tell you what, outside of maybe Bryson's agent, there's nobody that wants Bryson to win more than me.
All right. I think he's a reasonably good choice.
I think that he's right there. I think he continues to get better every year. And, Augusta is just about figuring out that course and however they set it up.
We're going to make our picks at the end of the show, but you'll be able to hear who they are. But I think that's a pretty good one.
All right.
You took him off the board. Now we can pick him too if we want.
I was going to say, you're welcome to pick him too if you want. I love the support.
Omer, Cam, good luck to you and to all of your golfers playing in the Masters this weekend and, of course, the rest of the season. And we really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Yeah, David, Tim, thank you very much. Have a good
Thanks,
rest
Omer.
of the day.
You
Okay, thanks again to 𝘕𝘀𝘀, EVP of Sales at 𝗎𝘰𝘭𝘧 Worldwide. As we mentioned, one of the top golf agencies out there, representing a ton of players across all the different golf tours, and certainly they'll have a busy week this weekend in Augusta. But we have reached that time of the show where we take a little peek ahead. We give shout outs, we make apologies, we do whatever we have to do to close the show. So Tim, what do you have your eye on?
Couple things. First, can we do call outs as opposed to shout outs?
Yeah, whatever. It's totally fluid moment.
I want to call out FIFA.
All right.
So FIFA on one hand claims that it has 500 million requests in for tickets for the upcoming World Cup. So if they do in fact have 550 million requests, why are they still out there hawking tickets? So recently they came up and said that you could buy tickets for the final match at MetLife Stadium, $10,990 to get in price. And just like for comparison, 4 short years ago in Qatar, they were $1,600 for similar quality seats. So that's, 1,000%.
There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be just making us scratch our head between now and when this tournament closes, but still looking forward to it. That I will say.
Yeah, and then I'm keeping my eye on a feud that has popped up between Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark, who is not known for being a shrinking violet. I think he speaks his mind and has always done so. But Cody Campbell, who's the head of the Texas Tech Board of Regents, they have gotten into a bit of a feud. Cody Campbell, if people know the name, it's because he has led the effort called Saving College Sports, trying to get the power conferences to pool their media rights, which has not happened. But apparently one of Brett's strategies for increasing interest in his school's football teams is to play on Friday nights in the fall. And so he's got Texas Tech scheduled to play the University of Houston on a Friday night. And as many people know, Friday night is in Texas is sacred for high school football. So Cody Campbell's not having it, so he and Brett Yormark have gotten in a feud. So I'd like to see where that goes, because I talked to somebody and they will remain nameless, but they were a big shot in the collegiate space. They weren't a commissioner, but they reported directly to a commissioner, and they said he's going to have a lot of bosses there, namely the heads of boards of regents and university presidents. And is he going to be able to manage having all those bosses when he's used to being the big dog himself? Now, it didn't happen as quickly as this person thought it would, but it's happening now.
We talked about it when he got named to that position. We were like, is that going to work with the way that the university world is, the way they're set up? So,
and it has. I think for the most part, it's worked very well.
I think it has, and he's done some unbelievable things. You have to give him credit for, I think, for not only coming out of the realignment that put more power to the SEC and the Big Ten, but to come out with a stronger Big 12. So we've credited him a lot, but I think knew that this was going to happen, like to your point. This was going to happen at some point, and agree it maybe happened a little later than we thought. But yeah, that will absolutely be an interesting one to follow.
What will be interesting to see, my mind just went here, it's been a couple of years since the last round of realignment, so I think we're probably 2 or 3 years away from the next one. So what about you?
Yeah, a couple things. I have to tell this. When I asked Omer about there was really a Mr. Bissell, I could not help but think back to the Springsteen show I was at to open Staples Center a long time ago, 2000 or so. And he was the first show, and he came out, and there were all kinds of problems with the locker room and the showers and whatnot. And Springsteen took the stage a little late. There was a bad ingress problem. But he comes on the stage, and the first thing he says is, "We had some problems back there with the showers and the rooms, but I know Mr. Staples is going to be working on that." There's no Mr. Staples, but anyway, okay. Springsteen impersonation, maybe not so good.
Yeah, no,
Rough,
it wasn't bad for.
Okay.
Yeah.
For a non-New
I was
Jersey
so
person.
close when you said there's a real Mr. Bissell. I was so close to saying, yeah, and he's really cleaned up with that business.
There you Yeah.
I should
I'm glad
get
you
points.
only got that close, but no.
Yeah.
All right. A couple things. Obviously, watching Masters, we're going to make our picks here in a second. But as we go into the Masters, the name that many of us most associate with the Masters, Tiger Woods, of course, Jack Nicklaus, and all the other greats that have won multiple times at Augusta. But Tiger is a big piece of the history of that place. And as we talked about last week, before he came out to make his apology and announcement and the fact that he was stepping away, we called for him to do just that. I'm not saying that we had anything to do with that, of course, but it happened pretty quickly after that we said that's what he should do. Our show was recorded on a Tuesday and it didn't air until Thursday. I want to continue to follow this. Tiger, we had said that we hope that for once Tiger could come totally clean and be a help to people, because even some of the players that have admired and idolized him, they're saying, we wish him well, we hope he gets the help he needs, but he's endangering potentially other people, so he really needs to take care of this. My hope is that he's being honest with himself and he is getting the help. I was curious as to your thoughts on whether you thought his statement went as far as it should have.
Words are cheap. He could say anything. And this is not a knock on him. I am glad that he has at least acknowledged the need for help. This is certainly not a secret, and I'm not comparing myself to Tiger Woods, but I am an alcoholic, and I haven't had a drink in 30-something years, so I know a little bit about addiction. And what happens is, at some point, the pain of stopping has to be worth it for you to take the steps necessary to get clean and sober. And you hear the term a lot in addiction, hitting rock bottom. Now, everybody's rock bottom is different, right? Maybe he's hit rock bottom, and if that's the case, then there's nowhere to go but up. But if he doesn't take it seriously and he enjoys what he gets from taking these medicines, these drugs, whatever it is he's on, if he enjoys that more than he enjoys what he would benefit from stopping, then he won't stop. My concern is similar to yours, that his rock bottom is that he winds up in jail with vehicular manslaughter charges. Because once you get behind the wheel of a car under the influence of anything, it is no longer just you.
Yeah.
So wish him well.
Yeah, wish him well, and hope that the people around him are, truly helpful and not just, people at that level. It's very easy to have people that are just enabling whatever it is that
absolutely
that makes it easy for them, and I'm hoping that's not the case, because he's clearly had good advisors around him, but he's also run into a number of difficult issues. So I don't know the inner workings of the current team, but hopefully it moves in the right direction for him. All right. Putting you on the spot. Who's your pick?
Who do you think?
You're going to pick Rory again. You're back to Rory.
I am.
That's cool. That's totally good. It's a great pick. Great pick.
Yeah. I didn't pick him last year and he won.
Didn't. Yeah. Okay. I'm going 𝘠𝘕𝗏𝘏.
Wow.
Swedish golfer, 26-year-old, currently 17th, but he's playing well, and this could be a good course for him. I think a lot of people think he is a major winner, so that's who I'm going with.
Okay.
All right.
Well, it is the unofficial start of spring.
Yeah.
Hopefully the weather holds up.
It's supposed to be great in Augusta. That's what I've heard. So
it's the only thing that counts. I mean, it could torrentially rain here. It's not going to impact my viewing experience.
Right. So that is it for this episode 153, if you're counting. Big thanks to Omer Kem, EVP of Sales at 𝘕𝘿𝘲 Worldwide, and a big thanks to Russ Spielman for helping arrange that, a past guest and good friend. Tim, thank you as always for a great discussion. And most importantly, thank you to the listeners for taking a little time with us. As we like to say, if you like what you hear, hit the like button, share, engage with us. And you can do that directly on the platforms that you listen to your podcast, or by following us on LinkedIn, which is our primary platform. But you can also check out dpandmcgee.com for any other links that you may be interested in. So until next time, I'm DP, he's McGee. We'll talk soon.